Okay, so I'm attempting to document every step of what it's taking me to go back into the cemetery wherein I had such an incredible experience, perhaps not for a preferable time, if you will. I did catch an attachment from this particular area, and I have had to make some pre-measures in order to visit it again. Now, one of the stipulations, there were three that came through in the way of intuition that they would like me to do prior to visiting this graveyard again. The first is to acknowledge the spirits that are there and not disclose the location of this cemetery. I know that I said I would do it before, but I've gotten a different feeling about this since, and I think primarily the energies that are there would rather be left alone. But maybe they do have the option of allowing me to come in and do this peacefully. Maybe there'll be some resistance. I really don't know, but I'm taking every means of protection I possibly can before I enter this space. So that's the first stipulation. The second is that I make a small donation to the maintenance of this particular graveyard. Now, I have actually contacted the town of Uxbridge, and I have done just that. I donated $20 to the maintenance of the Joseph Richardson Cemetery here in Uxbridge, and hopefully that will appease that part of the deal. Number 3, I am to bring a single flower and leave it at the entrance out of sign of respect for the energies and those who are there. Of course, children are also amongst the graves that are buried there, and unfortunately there's tragic stories dealing with disease and so forth in that respect that goes along with the history. So I just wanted to again start documenting this as quickly as I possibly can, because today is the day that we're going out. It's now 12:30 in the afternoon. We'll be leaving about 3:30, and we will continue with whatever experience comes to us. Alright, it's that time to head out to the cemetery that I had planned on investigating today, or at least documenting. I think that's more of an appropriate word. Alright, so I fulfilled my end of the deal, okay? I'm not telling you where it is. I got the flowers, and I made the donation to the town of Uxbridge in the name of that cemetery in way of maintenance. So hopefully everything goes well, and I trust that it will, but nonetheless, I am excited, nervous, and still very grounded. I have a job to do, so let's go. I did speak with my good friend Michelle Gray of the Healing H Arts, and she gave me some great advice in way of protection, which I feel is very necessary entering this place. I've done as much as I can. I think I've done my due diligence, and I feel very good about going into this space with the knowledge that I've taken every precaution that I possibly can. I want to show you guys we made it out here safely and soundly.
Definitely.
And of course the power plant across the street is quite audible. I don't know if you guys are able to hear it, but Michael and I are going to head into this graveyard and check it out. We've got the veteran experiencer here
Exactly.
with at least 20 visits. Myself, this will be the second time.
Yep.
But we are excited, folks, and grateful to have you along.
Excellent.
still, I remember this being more hilly, and there was a sign. I swear I saw something say Douglas State Forest. I mean, memory is what it is, but... here it is. Woo! I'm out of shape. Okay. This, I do remember. This is the point where my camera stopped working and the energies were being drained right out of the batteries.
Okay, so journey into this. So we'll start with the first time I came in here, and just even the approach coming into the graveyard itself was daunting, you know, where it was just like, what is this? Where did we come from? How did we get here? And where are we, you know? Right off the power lines, it's a crazy location. So immediately coming in, you know, curiosity, because you're just like, what is this? Where am I? A family graveyard, you know? And, you know, initially when I came in, I didn't really feel any sensation because I was much of a skeptic at that time. And the people I were with were very much, you know, very big believers in this place. So, you know, I was brought in, asked to be able to come in and check things out. And, you know, this is where some of these gravestones weren't tipped over at the time. You can see that actually over the years the leaves have built up, but some of these gravestones had been standing up. And when we were going through, there were literal shadows bobbing and weaving between these, as if an animal or something small was doing it. But as we approached it, there was no movement of leaves or anything else to give way of it. And we were surrounding it, so we would have seen whatever would have been able to, you know, sneak past us, be it mouse to snake. But once again, it was the middle of winter. We could have disturbed something, but I don't think so in that instance. So that's when things started getting more peculiar. Then we were brought over to here. This is where my friends were like, informed me that in this particular direction, in this gravestone, is the last executed witch in Massachusetts, you know, for witchcraft. And ironically, it is the most different out of most of the gravestones here, so it kind of leads you to suspicion. There are others that are located around it, including small ones from children, for sure. When these were less covered in lichen, I remember reading them. At this point in time, I couldn't tell you anything that was written on there. But at this point, you know, we were absorbing, you know, checking out everything, and we decided to turn around and leave. And as we were starting to leave, and I started walking this way with some of my friends, there was this weird orange ball, right? Kind of initially looked like a firefly, and it was just around here where it was bobbing and weaving through here. And I was about over here when my curiosity peaked, and I was like, I gotta check out what this is. Something's going on here. I've never seen anything like it. I took my glasses off to make sure there was nothing reflecting. The orb was still doing its thing. I turned around to my friends being like, do you guys see what I see? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, so it's not just me. It's not just residual whatever from the night before. This took place over probably the course of like a minute to 2 minutes. Because after I addressed them, I turned back. It's still there, mind you. We all took our eyes off it and came back, and it was still there. And at that point, I was like, well, I'm going to go touch it. And then arguments ensued about why I shouldn't touch it. My statement was, well, if I'm going to die from a paranormal activity, heck yeah. So I approach, and as I get up to about here, I wouldn't use this as a necessary marker, but it definitely was close enough. It came to about this height, and it was draped in, I'd say white, but it was more, it's dark out, everything's grayscale at that point in time. And then there was no lower half, but the upper half had solid form where it had a face. It was a little bit of gaunt and then looking straight at me. At that point, I was like, okay, you've made your point, and that's when we decided to leave the graveyard. During that particular interaction, one of my friends claimed to have been attacked by the ghost of the witch. I don't know how much that is true, to be honest with you. I didn't feel like that was the case. I don't think what I saw here was the witch's ghost, to be honest with you, nor do I think that it is malicious to that degree. I think that's just a negative connotation people put onto witches, you know?
What's the probability that that attack may have come from the Watcher spirit? Because although what followed me home was definitively female,
Definitely.
I'm very curious why somebody who is a witch, usually this is something used for a positive notion. Yes, they have spells to do something on the negative end in way of protecting themselves. But if they were persecuted, you know, I'd find it very odd that this particular entity or person would have garnered this much negativity that if you were to stroll in an off-beaten path graveyard, you have an issue.
I think that what we're looking at there, especially with that particular individual, where I think they were just a storyteller. I don't think that they were physically attacked. Years down the line, I've questioned many friends about it, because none of us have had negative interaction where anything physically harmed us being here. And multiple people have been here for the right and wrong reasons, and all of those people have said the same thing. None of them have had that. I've had a couple people come up here and perform seances. I protested against it, you know, because I'm like, hey, leave them alone. They don't want to talk. And, you know, they never got attacked during it. So I'm not sure where his story came from. But in my opinion, if anything, it would definitely be whatever's on the outside protecting whatever's in here. Because there's definitely something out there protecting something that's in here.
That's exactly what it feels like. It doesn't feel like it's necessarily
Nope.
within these four walls here. It feels like it's coming from out within the woods there. And, you know, we had discussed how, you know, both of us had felt it at separate times, you know, different areas of the woods here, that something may inhabit it, something may inhabit the deep forest here, and that's actually what's protecting this area. In your opinion, why do you think, and this is a question I've posed many times, why do you think that a Watcher spirit is necessary for, let's say, a colonial graveyard? Maybe something in the way of ancient Aztecian architecture or an Indian burial ground of some sort. I can kind of understand because they were known to use that type of energy, but colonists didn't usually partake in that type of magic.
I think that when it comes down to those things and we get to the point of crossing the spiritual realm and protectors and non-protectors, there's no religious boundaries involved in it. So whatever these guardians are just guarding souls. They're not necessarily guarding their faithful souls, you know? So I think that that's what it is. And even though, so with colonial, it's very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things going on there, but there's still divineness within them, you know, but with the initial spark that creates them. So it's got to be protected, and that's probably what it's protecting, is the innocence that is still here, that is resting peacefully, you know, and being able to be rested peacefully. And I think that that's what comes down to what, in my opinion, is really happening for this particular place, as well as a couple other, you know, locations out there, is that I think guardians are just doing it to protect it from people like possibly us that work on the other end. You know, we're spiritualists that are trying to do it to cohabitate with them. Others are looking to take things from them and use them, and I think that that's a big portion about what's going on here, is they're trying to protect whatever this may be. So I think that that's what's going on, that maybe there's, like I said to you on our interview, I think there's a ley line here, and I think it's part of protecting that ley line. And since these bodies and spirits have been laid to rest here, it's part of the ley line protection. You know, who knows, they could be part of protecting the ley line and being warriors themselves.
So when we came here 12 years ago, the first thing that I experienced using a high-8 camera, I brought 2 batteries with me, something I've mentioned before in way of this particular story, and I really thought for maybe a half-hour investigation this was going to be enough. As soon as I walked over the threshold and into the graveyard, my first battery completely drained, shut the camera off. Well, I thought that was pretty odd. Well, maybe it's something technological. Let's switch out for the next battery. So that's exactly what I did, and immediately this full charged battery drained half. And I thought, well, it's going to be a shorter expedition than I thought, but again, that's still very strange. And this was in addition to some of the other electrical issues I was dealing with the camera, fuzzy screen, there was some glitching, artifacting happening. We've seen all of this in different ghost investigations and so forth, but if nothing else, it certainly indicates that there's a disturbance within the flow of whatever energy field you're working with. So when I came in here, I was of course with you, Michael, and I was with, I think, maybe I had 4 or 5 other people in total, 6 or 7 altogether, perhaps. You know, I came over to this section and, you know, we kind of all split up in our own ways. Even though this is a small graveyard, we still kind of had our own pockets to explore. So Chris Kibbitt, my other investigator at the time, and I were over by this wall. And of course, you guys have heard this story, but to see the physical location is something else. So we'll take a walk over here real quick so I can kind of stand in the same place and recollect exactly what I experienced. It was in this vicinity. It was before the smaller headstones that are over here. I honestly want to say I was right about here where this tree growth is. I was observing the eastern side of the cemetery, and all along this wall were apparitions that were fleeting, walking about, bustling through their silence, and it was the most jarring thing. Now, with my camera in hand, I started noticing with my naked eye some of those flittering apparitions over by the wall. So I got curious and I started filming right about here. As I'm doing so, I'm watching these through the lens and through my other eye, you know, very interesting contrast, and all of a sudden something comes towards me super quick. I mean, I didn't have a moment to register what it was, but as it did, it went through me, knocked me back like this, camera went up in the air. Chris Kibbitt was standing right behind me, happened to kind of catch me haphazardly as he was facing the forest that way, and as he pushed me back up, I saw this thing come back out the same way it came in, and as I looked up, I started seeing these little light orbs that were floating upwards. Gave me the impression as if I fell into a swimming pool backwards and was sinking to the bottom, watching the bubbles rise to the top. Very odd. I actually had to take a moment to catch my breath, which I then sat along this wall right here to do just that. Now, one thing I find very interesting is that the grave of the alleged witch is, of course, right here in the center of all these smaller headstones that have degraded over time, and yet it was just behind that grave that I was seeing a lot of that activity. Could there be a correlation in respect to the one who's buried there and perhaps the multitude of energies that I was seeing in some sort of personality? I want to remind you that even though I wasn't able to see each one of these entities within their totality in one look, I was seeing sections of them. First the legs, I'd focus on the legs, they disappear, I'd see the torso disappear, I'd see the head, and it would sort of repeat the process. They were coming this way and they were coming back, they were crossing each other, and yet again it was very, very soundless, which really, again, I couldn't wrap my head around. I would have to say that my observation of these apparitions against that wall was probably going on for maybe about a minute and a half if I were to take a quick stab at that. It's difficult to gauge because a lot of times when you come into spaces like this, time does not flow the way you would normally think. I'm not necessarily suggesting that you're losing some sort of linearity, but there's maybe a slowing of time, or there's a quickening of time, or there's a stopping of time altogether. Oh my God, my hands are heating up right now. You feel it too? Wow, oh, I feel it, yep. Right behind me. Okay. Okay, just checking it out, All right, gotcha. Ah, wow, okay. I was waiting for that. I was waiting for that. Okay, so, oh my God, dude. The energy is absolutely insane right here. It's just rising up like this, and it's kind of lapping up against, you know, the back of my neck and the back of my head and rounding out. I don't know if you guys are going to see anything or we'll observe this in the clip, but I'm starting to get a little dizzy here. You can see it, you can feel it, right? Oh my God. I'm not here to interact. That's exactly one of the intentions that I put forward. I'm here to document. I appreciate this energy being here and allowing us to talk at length about the experiences and past interactions that we've had without perhaps creating something new. I don't think at this point that's necessary. We've kind of done that self-work to get where we are today. At any rate, so I did see that gravestone. I'll cover that in a moment that broke, and I'm pretty sure I've defined which one it is. But as Michael was telling us, this grave has certain significance. Now, we don't know for a fact who is exactly buried here, but that's unfortunately because the records aren't kept. Now I'm starting to feel my energy get pulled out of me. Yep, I'm starting to get a little, yeah, it's curious, just an observation here. Now, one of the things that Michael reminded me is that when we did, would you call it a seance? Yeah. Okay, so it was a little seance. I'll be honest, again, I didn't really have much to do in way of leading that. I was just a participant, more peripheral than anything. And I believe I stood, I think it was about here, if I'm not mistaken, and we did join hands. Michael reminded me that he had placed a piece of amethyst on top of the grave. Again, all intentions of the most positive nature does not necessarily mean that whatever result you come up with will be reflective of that intention. Sometimes it's about how you communicate it, how you convey it, and of course we're not talking to a physical person wherein I can shake their hand and look in their eye and read body language, not the way that we would physically. So you have to take other precautions and pre-measures in order to make sure that communication is dictated, especially when you are attempting to act on their realm as well, right? That's very important. So when we decided that we had had enough, and I think, as I mentioned, I had figured that out much sooner than some of the other participants there breaking circle, I started feeling a lot more in that way, and I think I was still reeling from whatever went through me over here in the north side wall here. I told Michael, I said, we got to get going, to which he, of course, obliged. And we walked out of the cemetery, and just beyond this turnaround, as you just step out, it was, I think, roundabout there, we all stopped and said, you know what? Something doesn't feel right. And it did feel like something was coming. By the way, that whatever was standing behind me, it was really, really tall. Yep. Yeah, it was like, I mean, maybe 9-10 feet tall. Okay, 100%. You saw it. I think that's the Watcher, if I'm going to throw anything out there. Yeah. I'm pretty positive that's what that is. And it's still here. It's not like sticking to me or anything, you know what I mean? So it's really pleasant to be able to be in this space, still have the experience of feeling that, knowing that it's not something I need to be concerned about in way of danger. So yes, as I mentioned, this gravestone around about over here, it was this one right here. I had a little tightness in my stomach though. I think that's usual. Yeah, like right in the solar plexus, yep. This is the gravestone that actually fell, and there was somebody standing right about where this smaller stone is, and as this thing fell, it nearly missed their ankle by a handful of inches. I mean, I didn't have time to react. It was something that I witnessed, and unfortunately, even though I caught this on video, that footage has been lost in the myriad of moves that I have undertaken in the last 12 years. I actually could tell you where it is, but I know it's not there anymore. There's another tenant living in that building, and I'm sure they found my camera and had a blast with it. Long story short, that was something to me was certainly a warning. And if that had fallen on that person's leg, then they could have gotten seriously harmed. And again, it's not that I don't think the capacity was there for something like this to occur. It's that, again, I think this was more of a warning than something intentionally to bring harm. Nonetheless, I've never seen anything like that. I mean, you look how thick this thing is. I mean, we're going 4 or 5 inches thick, okay? And it just literally split. Now, maybe there was some degradation to the integrity already, but I certainly didn't see it. And even if there was, there's no logical explanation as to why this would have broken and literally fallen forward the way that it did. So right now it's about 5:30 in the afternoon. We are within the springtime, so we have a few more, maybe a couple hours of sunlight before things go down. Now, with this in mind, it's not necessarily somewhere I need to come back to after dark, and in a lot of cases, I don't really need to come to these locations in the dark. I mean, you can find just as much in way of communication and interaction as you can at night during the day. Quite honestly, I like to see where I'm going. I've fallen plenty of times in the woods in the dark, and it's not fun, to say the least. Again, and I was thinking the other day when I mentioned, why are some of these monuments within the graveyard so phallic? Why did we choose this design? And it sort of occurred to me that maybe this was intentional or not, but we do have the feminine with the interment, right? So we dig that hole and we place the body inside. This is feminine, it's wrapped in the cocoon, and the remembrance is phallic, and that's what we mark the grave with. Very curious thought that came afterwards, after I shot that episode. I just wanted to share that. Yes, very quickly, Michael brings up a great point when, I tell you that I can't disclose the location of this graveyard. Clearly, this is something more grounded in spirit rather than my own personal decision not to divulge it. But there's a reason, and it's not necessarily for your protection. It's actually for the protection of what's here. And again, I don't mean in a physical sense. I don't think people are going to come up here kicking gravestones and stuff like that. But this particular space is very sacred, and perhaps we could even, straddle a line and say that it's magical. And I'm sure that it is within its history. We just don't know exactly why, but we can certainly feel the presence of that type of energy here. So again, it's not necessarily for your protection. It's because this is what I was asked to do from the ones that are here, and it resonated so deeply with me that I had no qualms about honoring that request. And you know what? I'm going to tell you this. If you guys want to do the research and get heavy and try to find this place yourself, you're more than welcome to, but I cannot give you any guidance on that.
I try to abstractly look at everything without pushing my beliefs onto things, I definitely believe guardian spirits and spirits themselves, but when it comes to their beliefs and how they structuralize things, I always look at it from how would they be without my thought instead, and create them from that purpose and going from there.